take some time to show you some more elements of Sheets so that you can create what this is, which is a student growth data tracker that you could use for your SLO or for any other student data you may be collecting at any point in time. So this is my sample template that we're going to work together to build using both formulas and some formatting tools that I did not cover in that last video. So first and foremost, I have my blank sheet up in front of me, and something that I like to do before I even start is just kind of like type in where all of my headers and things are going to go, so the information that I'm going to want in the sheet, and then I can play around with the formatting after. So I'm just going to go ahead and speed through that real quick so that you can just see me put in all of that information. Okay, so after I have all of my headers and information in there, then I will take the time to do some of the formatting things that we talked about in the previous video. So I will go ahead and change my fonts to match up. I'll change my sizes. I'll use in the fill buckets so that I can have a chart that looks a little bit more aesthetically pleasing than the way it looks right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and again speed through and build those elements. If you forget how to do any of those things, I recommend looking back at my previous video, or also feel free to reach out to me and I can help you with any of those formatting pieces. Okay, so once my chart is built, there is an element that I did not talk about in the last video that I want to show you how you can do. So you'll notice here that this text is currently aligned in the left corner. So I'm gonna center that text, but it's still found at the very bottom of the box. I don't necessarily like the way that looks since this box is so big, and I would prefer if it showed up in the middle. So I can highlight over those rows of the text that I want to move, and up top here next to the alignment, there is an arrow that has a line underneath of it. It's called vertical align. And if I click that, I have the option to have my text align at the bottom where it currently is, the middle, or the top. And if I click the middle, it's going to just nicely center that for me in the middle of the box, so I have the information that I need. Another nice feature is, for example, over here, I don't want to change the size of this box. I'm happy with how it looks, but the text to me feels a little bit crowded. So I can actually change the direction of this text so that it fits better in this box. So next to text wrapping, there is an A with an arrow kind of going diagonal that says text rotation, and you have the ability to change the way the text is aligned. It can go sideways, diagonally, up or down. So I'm going to change this from going from the regular way we see our text to going up, and so that's going to fit in there a little bit better. And I'm going to just make this one size bigger, and then I will text wrap that so that it doesn't go into the other boxes and I can see everything that I need to see just crystal clear for me. So again, that's the little A button for text rotation. Now I need to start filling in my information. So one cool thing about Sheets is that it can do a lot of work for you. So for example, let's say that I have my class list, but all of my students on my class list are listed with their first and their last name. And I want to separate them by first and last, but I don't want to have to type that over and over again. So something that you can do is highlight over the names that you want to separate, and up where it says data, there's an option that says to split text into columns. So if I click this feature, it'll ask me how I want to determine the separation. So is there a comma? Is there a semicolon? For this case specifically, there's a space. So I'll click space. and it will automatically separate them for me into 2 columns. So it looks like here that possibly my first name had an extra space. So I'll go in and delete that real quick. And then I can set this up so that they separate into the 2 columns. Just like so. Now I want to change the font and things real quick, so just give me a quick moment to speed through and change some fonts. From here, I am likely going to begin filling in my test scores. So let's say, for example, I already have my pre and post test scores, so I will just fill those in real quick. Okay, so here is where we will begin to go from Sheets 101 to our next level of sheets by starting to use some formulas to help us get some important information from the data that we have here. So what I am going to want to see is the difference between my post-test score and my pre-test score. And so the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to write a formula in this growth sheet here. So up at the box up top here where we have the FX, this is where we're going to put our formulas. And anytime you're putting a formula in, you want to always start with your equal sign. So I'm going to start with an equal sign. So in order to determine the growth, I need to know the difference between the post-test score and the pre-test score. So I am going to just write that as an equation. So I'm going to say that whatever is in this cell right here, which would be D7, and I can just select that 7, and I can just select that cell. I'm going to then put my minus symbol and then select the other cell that I want to have the difference in, and I'm going to click enter, and it will tell me the difference between those 2 cells. Now what's awesome is that Sheets might figure out that I wouldn't want to do this for all of my cells, so it will automatically suggest that formula for each of those. So I can click this check button here, and it will automatically fill all that information in for me. If for some reason this suggestion did not come up, I'm going to show you another easy way you can do this. So you can actually click and drag your formula down. So just like we did with the calendar, when you can grab the blue square down in the corner here, I can hold that blue square and drag all the way down, and that's going to fill that formula in for each of the rows down below. Now I can see the growth change here, but it would be really nice if I could have that color coded automatically to tell me if a student has positive growth, or if they have negative growth, or if they've made no change at all. So we're going to use something called conditional formatting to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and select this column where all of my growth is shown, and up top I'm going to go to Format and then click Conditional Formatting. And I'm gonna have a pop-up box come over here on the side, and I'm gonna come up with a rule that's going to determine what color it makes the box. So I will click the Format Rules, and I'm gonna find the one that says is equal to, and I'm going to type in 0. So if any of those are equal to 0, it will color the box or do whatever to the font that I have selected here. So I'm gonna make it bold, and I'm gonna make that box yellow as my color to signify there's been no change whatsoever. I can click done, or I can add another rule, and I'm going to add another one. So I'll click add another rule, and this is still gonna have that same section highlighted. It says format cells if, so I'll go ahead now and find less than. So if our total is less than 0, it will make it bold, and I'm going to change that to red so that really stands out to me so I can see which students have scored less than 0. And then again, I will add another rule, and this time I will change my less than to greater than. So if the score is greater than 0, I'm going to have that get colored in green so that I can see those students and what their scores were. So no matter what the score is in this section, it's going to color code that for us, so it'll be really easy to see the student's growth and whether or not it's a positive or a negative, and it just my eyes directly drawn right to it so I can see exactly how my students are doing. Now, something I might want to do, if you're noticing my list right now, my students are not listed in alphabetical order. This might just be the order that I tested them or that I got their assessments. And so I might want to go through and adjust my rows to change them in alphabetical order. One way I could do that if these rows were just my students' names, or up in the column, I could sort. I can click on the column and the little arrow next to it, and I can sort from A to Z or Z to A. Now, if I click this right now, it's going to have to tell me I can't do this because there are some merged cells, and it's unsure how it's going to be able to move those things around. So with that being said, I'm gonna highlight just the text that I want to be put in alphabetical order. I want to include the scores so that the students' scores stay together, and all of my students' first and last name. I will then right click, and in my options, I'll go to where it says view more cell options. And here I see where it says sort range. So this is going to give me the choice to sort by any of my rows. So column A would be first name, column B would be last name. I could sort by the pre-test score, the post-test score, or even by growth. But for now, I'm just going to sort by last name so that my kids are in alphabetical order. So I'm going to sort by column B from A to Z, and I'll click sort, and it will have moved all of my students and their test scores with them so that now they're in alphabetical order by last name, so that it will be very easy for me to see and track any of that information if I was moving this over to report cards or something like that. The next feature I want to show you is how to freeze rows. So let's say, for example, you have more than the 12 students I have listed here, and you want to be able to scroll down and have some of this information freeze or stay up top. So I'm going to select the rows I want to freeze, which I want to freeze where it has the headers. And after I've selected row 6, I can right click, and I can go to view more cell actions, and it has freeze up to row 6. So I would go ahead and click that. And what's going to happen is this gray line is going to form under row 6, which means that this row up top here is frozen. So I can scroll all the way down as much as I want, and that top row is not going anywhere, which is really helpful as I might need to look for a different child's name farther down the list. All right, so continuing our journey in excelling our ability to use sheets, we're going to talk about a couple more formulas that we might want to include here. So up top here, I have a box for my overall growth average. So if I want to know, out of every kid in my class, what are we averaging for our growth? So I'm going to put a formula in this box that's going to do that math automatically for me. So I'm just going to type in my equal sign because we are using a formula, and I will type in the word average. And as I'm typing in average, you'll see there'll be a list that comes down here of different average formulas. I want that first one that just says average, or I could just continue to type the word. So now it's asking me, what do I want the average of? And so I want my average to be of the growth area. So I can click and highlight all of the cells that I would like to be included in that average growth. And then I can close my parentheses and click enter, and it's going to give me that average growth score. I can turn this into a percentage if I want to know the percentage. I can not have it as a percentage, and I can leave it as a decimal. I can increase or decrease the amount of decimal I see in my average growth, but this is going to give me that information of how much of my students are growing. What is the average? This is giving me the average of my students here. Down below here, I have some other information that I can use formulas to help me best figure out some additional information that I could use to help continue to inform my instruction. So the first part of that would be figuring out how many students I've tested. So there is a formula that I can include that will count as many of the cells as I want counted, and it will, if they're blank, it won't count them. So for example, I might have a student move in later on, and if that's the case, I might need to add that student to the bottom of my list, and I can make sure that that student will get counted in my count here. So the formula I'm going to use is equal, my equal sign, and then I'm going to put count and then the letter A. And I want it to count starting from A7, and I want it to go all the way down, let's say to A35. So I'll hold A7 and carry it all the way down to A35. So any name that I end up putting in between there is going to get counted. So I can close my parentheses and click enter. Right now, I only have 12 students who are listed here, but like, let's say I added my own name to the bottom, that student is going to get counted and my 12 will go up to a 13. All right, so you might have seen before I added my name here that there was suggestions for additional formulas to be dragged here. Those formulas were not what I wanted. They would have been just a different formula than what I'm looking to have here. So that's why I did not click that accept button. So it is important that you check that your formulas are going to be what you're looking for before you just automatically accept those autofill formulas. So the next thing I am looking for is the percentage of my students who increased. So what I need to do is have the sheet both count the amount of students who increased, and then to get that percentage, I'm going to divide by the number of students who took the test. So I'm going to use the count if feature. So I'll put equal signs, count if, and that's going to count a specific range. And so I want it to count all of my growth range. And then I want it to only count it if the student scored greater than a 0, because that means they increased. So if the growth there is greater than 0, that means that they've increased. And then I'm going to divide that by the amount of students who took the test. So just this cell here. So I will divide it by I9 and click enter. And that's going to tell me that 0.5 of my students have increased. If I want to turn that into a percentage to make it a little bit more clear for me how many of my students, I can just come up top here and click the little percent button, and that's going to tell me the percentage of students who increased. So currently 50% of my students have increased their score thus far. We're going to do the same thing for unchanged. So the amount of students who have scored a 0 or have no change thus far in their growth. So I will again click my equal sign and then type count if. My range will still be all of my growth. Then I'm going to put in my comma, and I want if it equals a 0. So if their growth equals 0. And then again, we are going to divide that by our total number of students, which can be located here in this cell, and I will click enter. Now, this is a repeating decimal, so I'm going to use the decrease decimal place option here to decrease my decimal so that it is not as large, and then I will turn that into a percentage. And then lastly, we have our decreased. So then from here, I'm again going to click equal count if. Then I'm going to take my growth cells, and I am now looking for if it is less than 0. Less than 0. And again, divided by that total number of students who took the test. So again, we'll click enter, another repeating decimal. So I will get that to be just a little bit smaller and then turn that into a percentage. So now I can see the percentage of my students who have increased, who have decreased, or have unchanged thus far in my pre and post assessment that I gave. And all of that data and math was done for me just by typing in my pre and post scores. So I'm going to leave the sample option for you on this template, as well as a blank version in case you wanted to increase. And I will make sure the blank version is set up so it will calculate at least 50 students for those of you who have larger class sizes or are looking to do more than one period. We could even include a column on the side here that has the period that you have each of those students if you wanted to include that as well for better organization. If you have any questions on what we did here with the sheet, or you are looking to try this in your classroom and you're just a little bit nervous to set this up yourself, please feel free to send me an email, and I can either A, make you a video, or B, we can set up a time to meet together and we can talk about how you can best be using Sheets to benefit you and help you track your student data. That's it for our Sheets 102 course on how to build a growth data sheet.